Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Unique Items. Today, we're going to be going over a unique that was added in one of the previous seasons, but has been overhauled tremendously, and could be really interesting this season. I know Shadow Necromancers aren't really like the in fashion at this particular point, but they definitely have given the old Ebonpiercer quite the overhaul in terms of what it's capable of. And I also have a greater affix one there I'm going to show you too. So this the Ebonpiercer is a unique amulet. It's specifically for the Necromancer, and it does have it's been updated with the Blight projectiles cast twice of up to a 25% chance, which is really nice. It also has +3 to Blight itself, which of course is the main skill that you're going to be buffing with this ability. And on top of that, we also have +5 to Reaper's Pursuit. Reaper's Pursuit is the one that I'm pretty sure that's the one that makes you run faster, right? No. Reaper's Pursuit is this one right here. Yeah. Damaging enemies with darkness skills increases your movement speed by 5%. I was right. For 3 seconds. So that's going to give you a pretty interesting buff to movement speed while you're using this particular amulet. Plus, that's my greater affix one. Plus up to +5, which is 5 times 5, obviously, so 25%. And then on top of that, we also have a plus to Gloom, which is another one of the passives that you have on this ability. And that is when you damage enemies with darkness skills, they take 2% increased damage from you and your minions for 2 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. And of course, this is going to give you an additional bonus to that Gloom passive, which is going to give you more damage output, up to 2, which is another multiplier. And then on top of that, it also has Blight also shoots 4 smaller projectiles that pierce enemies and deal up to 44,120 shadow damage over 3 seconds. Now, this is a basic version of it that's not really all that amazing, but I'm going to show you the greater affix in a second. This talisman was the life's work of Death Speaker Jordan. Following his premature demise, Jordan's successor wore this amulet in tribute as they trialed against the Temple of the Death Speaker. Now, the greater affix version that I have here is absolutely insane, and this one actually is ridiculous. This one, obviously, it rolled perfect on the Blight projectiles cast twice. It also rolled perfect on the Blight. It rolled +7 on the Reaper's Pursuit, which is going to give you a really nice amount of move speed, and +3 on the Gloom. And it also rolled perfect on the shadow damage coming from the Blight smaller projectiles, which is just insane. So let's go ahead and play around with this for a second, shall we? Now, keep in mind, I'm not a Shadow Necromancer, and so this is not indicative of what you would see from a pure Shadow Necromancer. But let's see what I can put out with this particular ability right now. So let's go ahead and cast our Blight Puddles. And as you can see, I mean, it just does a lot of additional subsequent damage coming out from the initial target. Like if I cast it over here, you'll notice that it definitely has these individual spikes. And let me take off Tyrael's because it kind of dilutes it. The individual spikes come out from your hand, as you can clearly see, which is kind of odd because I don't know really like... if you read it, it makes it sound like it comes from the actual Blight circle itself. And if you're standing close, you won't really see it because it just kind of disappears into the hubbub of what's going on. But if you back up a little bit and you cast it, you can see the projectiles coming out. So you're going to get 4 additional projectiles, which are going to dish out more additional damage. And of course, if you're standing closer to the enemy, like for instance, if you're right in the enemy's face, when you fire off your particular Blight ability, you're going to hit them with all 4 of these projectiles at once, which is going to deal a pretty massive amount of damage. And as you can see, like even without honestly having any kind of actual passives to increase this damage output, look at my 1.5 million shadow damage over time that's currently stacking on the target right there. 1.5 million damage, and I am not set up at all for this particular build. Like, I literally, all I did was, I don't have any points in Blight. Like, I've got no points in Blight, except for maybe just the Shaco giving me, like, the basic core skills. And then I also am just putting 1 point in Shadow Blight with nothing in the passives, and I was already hitting 1.5 million, which is pretty impressive for the damage output when you take a look at this particular item. I think Ebonpiercer has definitely come up in the world from what it was when it first started. I think it was always decent, like, don't get me wrong, but with a chance to cast Blight projectiles twice, combined with all the passive bonuses, the plus the skills of Blight itself, and the gloom, including the ridiculous 44,120 shadow damage, which of course can be scaled because he keeps chewing on my buttons. Will you stop chewing on my buttons? Button chewer? Don't look cute just because you got caught. You're always chewing on my buttons. Let me give you something else to chew on. Here, have a Dorito. Apparently you're hungry and you want a chip. There, have a chip or something. There, just leave my buttons alone. There, there's some chips. Jeez, button chewer.
Mr. Goody Two Shoes, Mr. Goody Two Shoes. Ginger Evil Mentor here. Why bother farming when you can go to MMOEXP.com and simply purchase your items in gold? GGM would have you farm the items. What a pathetic being. Use code GEM Ginger Evil Mentor for 6% off your entire purchase. And don't tell Ginger Gaming Mentor that I was here.
Now, obviously, if you're doing Blight, this is, I think, a really go-to amulet at this point. And that was the entire intention, obviously, is they wanted to be like, okay, well, if he's using Blight, we want to make sure that he's using this amulet. Well, and if you have a really good one of these, I think it's pretty much a no-brainer at this point, specifically because of, obviously, not only the extra damage, but also the fact that it does multiple projectiles. So one of the things that you got to know about the way that Shadow Blight key passive works is that the Shadow Blight key passive, obviously, is going to affect the damage output by the number of shadow, pumps that you're getting on the target. In this particular case, it's the every 8th time that you hit an enemy with shadow damage from you or your minions, you're going to get a Shadow Blight key passive pump, right? Well, think about it. If I'm hitting the target once with Blight, 4 times with the 4 projectiles that are coming out of the ability, right? And then on top of that, I'm also getting an additional 1 Blight that is being double cast. That's 6 times I'm hitting the target in 1 potential shot. That's 6 times. And then a second subsequent time is going to immediately trigger a Shadow Blight key passive response. And so I can literally just hold that button down, essentially, getting multiple Shadow Blight key passives just with something, as simple as the Ebonpiercer, which I think is extremely nice. And the movement speed is certainly not something to shake a stick at either. As you can see, this is my movement speed currently. Not exactly very fast, but I throw the Ebonpiercer on, and it gives us a little movement speed bump as well, which just because we're of course using the Reaper's Pursuit. But you have to actually attack, so you use a couple blights, and then just like that, we got our nice little movement speed bump, and it stays active pretty much all the time because you're constantly damaging things with darkness abilities. It's certainly not a terrible thing to have an additional movement speed. I certainly like it. Overall, I think it's a really good amulet. It is very specific, obviously, to the Shadow builds, and it's also very specific to the Blight builds, which is a whole nother thing. There is one thing I'd like to test in this video, which I think would be pretty neat, is, I don't know, I don't think it will, but I'd like to test the Bone Prison causes a Blight puddle to appear onto the target. I'd like to see if perhaps the Bone Prison is affected by this. And if it is affected by this, potentially how, is affected. We can do, this quick test real quick. It won't take us but a second. We're just going to grab the Blight aspect, which is the one that gives you the Bone Prison spawns a Blight puddle. And I'm just going to throw it on something. It doesn't really matter what. And we're going to put that in our main hand here real quick. And we're just going to do a quick test and see if the Bone Prison also casts the additional projectiles. Now, I doubt that it will. But, for the sake of thoroughness on these videos, I like to test out pretty much everything. So let's go ahead and play around with this and see what we get. It could be interesting if it did. That would be kind of neat. So let's go ahead and just cast our Bone Prison from here. I'm not ready yet. So it doesn't look like it does. We do have it on, right? So, in that particular case, it doesn't look like it is. I'm also curious whether it's double casting the Bone Prison or the Blight itself in the center. But it'd be kind of hard to test that, I think. Interesting. I'm so tempted to do a shadow build now with all the beautiful shadow items on the Necromancer, even though shadow is not like the most ridiculously crazy build this season. But there are things like the Mortacrux and there's the Ebonpiercer, which could make for some very interesting shadow builds. Not entirely sure. I kind of like the ideas. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when just tries to eat my buttons. Button eater. Eat your ear. How about that? That's right. And be sure to hit that like button and the subscribe button if you enjoy the content. And as always, keep watching.